Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Communications, the Impact Cast. I'm your host, Mark Johnson, and today I'm very delighted to have with me Xi Liu, who is the CEO and founder of Ferne Health. And I'm going to have to read the spiel here. A healthcare startup that builds at-home screening services for sexual health in Southeast Asia. She is ex-Amazon and Adobe, I believe, and probably very interesting and excitingly, she was named as one of Forbes 30 under 30 for Asia, I think last month or the month before. So one, congratulations, and two, thank you for joining us. So how are you today?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for the introduction, and also thanks for like your nice words.
Of course, of course. So you're actually, I'm probably going to caveat this right at the start. You're in China at the moment, so we are obviously going to run through this, but if we have any tiny technical issues, please forgive us. We will work around them as we can. So I just wanted to start
Okay,
off
sounds good.
actually, yeah, excellent. So I want to start off, that was my spiel about Fern Health. I'm sure you can do much better than I can. So please, can you tell us about what your startup does?
Definitely. And first of all, like you did a fantastic job. So, hey guys, my name is Xi. I'm the founder of Fearn Health. We are a telehealth startup delivers at-home solutions for common screening services. So that includes the common STDs or like the discharge testing or even UTIs. Our services are mainly focusing on women, but then we do provide common STD testings for males too.
Okay, thank you. That was definitely better than my introduction. So, as with normal, there's a lot of ground to cover, and I'm very excited to have she with us today because I think it's a very interesting space that she's started her company in, not only because of the subject matter and it being in Southeast Asia with all the complications that that can kind of bring, but also she's a female entrepreneur. So not only is she's kind of tackling two taboo subjects, which is being a female and an entrepreneur, and also stuff to do around sexual well-being and sexual health in Southeast Asia. But as always, I like to kind of step back a little bit and go back into the past. So can you tell me a bit about how you've got to where you are today? Sort of what is your journey? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Was it a bolt of lightning that hit you because you were in San Francisco before this? Can you, yeah, just let us know what your journey was like?
Yeah, definitely. I would say if I circle back a few years ago, neither of the things I'm doing right now, being an entrepreneur or building a startup in sexual health, was on my roadmap. So personally, I'm from China. I grew up in China and I moved to the US after college. So I was around 22. So I guess that back then, was going through the life changes and a lot of things happened, that when I moved to a new country, I started learning that a lot of things when I was growing up that I was supposed to learn. For example, the basic about how a woman should take care of like their own bodies, or like the basic of sexual health, like that we just never learned about those. So when I moved to the US, quite a few like very awkward interactions occurred, that including normally when we are having a conversation, and that's when I realized I had no idea about a lot of things, the basic things about contraceptions, or the basic checkups like the vaccines, HPV vaccines, that I never heard about that. And even when I went to the doctors, a lot of things I have to relearn from my doctors. And so all of those were just very interesting. Um, Back then, I guess like I never thought about to take any actions to actually do something for those kind of interesting things. It's more like, oh, I never thought about this. Let me talk to my friends. Oh, they also didn't know about this. But after college, oh, actually after my grad school, I moved to San Francisco and worked there for the past like, couple of years. And when I was there, I guess like the startup vibe did have a great impact on me, and
Mhm.
also I saw a lot of great people trying to build some impactful uh, projects to contribute back to a community that they came from. So they could share what they have learned in the past experience with those people who haven't learned about this. I think those things were all like very inspiring for me. And eventually, I guess like 2 3 years ago, you can call it a life crisis. I decided, oh, maybe I should do a startup. So all of those this year's experience just came into my mind. So I decided, oh, I should do a startup, and then it should be impactful for some people that we could actually change the life, at least in one aspect, for some people, and I wish that could be women, and I wish that could happen in Asia. So last year, I moved to Singapore because of this reason to build a startup in Asia and for Asian women.
Okay, I mean that's fascinating, and I think there's a lot to kind of unpick there. I kind of want to ask first off, why do you think you I mean, I think maybe you kind of explain this as well as why you came back here to kind of do it, but like, why do you think you were fairly naive when it came to sexual, like all things to do with sex, basically sexual well-being, health? Like, what was it? Was it because you grew up in China? Was it a wider issue than that? Like, what was it that kind of affected your knowledge about these very important subjects?
hmm I think generally speaking, culturally, as culturally living in Asia, we don't feel comfortable talking about a lot of private issues, especially when it comes to sexual health or even women's health are very taboo in a lot of countries.
Hmm.
It's either due to the religion or a lot of old opinions coming from the history, or even just the society is not in a good spot to accept such an open topic. So if I talk to a lot of women across Asia. It's not just like in China that people don't talk about sex.
Yeah.
It's across the whole Asian countries. Most of the people don't feel comfortable discussing such a topic, which directly links to two very big gap in everyone's life. When growing up, not many people growing up in Asia got a proper sex education. So when they become an adult, when you start like looking for healthcare solutions to take care of your life, to put your life together, we all went through this kind of like, small hiccup, like, oh, where should I start? Me as a person, where should I start like looking out to like take care of myself?
Hmm.
What kind of like the checkup items I should be paying attention to? And then the second part is also the information latency. So even for those people who are a little bit progressive, they understand, oh, it is very important to take care of ourselves, to take care of our sexual health. It's very hard to find the credit information. If you go on Google, you can find a lot of things, but then not many of them are very credit from the doctor, and a lot of them are kind of need this. Mm. So, for example, I think we were creating this blog. Blog is a very like a big thing for our platform. And then one
Hmm.
time we were creating a blog, and all of a sudden came into our mind, we should do a blog post about what to look out for the first like gynae visit, because a lot of young women and they're actually this is a blank. You don't have anyone to talk to, and all of the information we could find is all set up for the U.S. context or the U.K. context. We just can't find anything that's suitable for the whole Asian context, not even
Hmm.
in Singapore. And that was just like kind of surprising because if you think about um, Singapore is already pretty developed and it's very advanced country in Asia, but then we still can't find such an information source. So when I was looking at that, I was just thinking, oh, if I kind of grew up in this context, that again, I would probably still run into the same situation that I can't find the information to help myself.
Interesting. And do you find, because I think, I mean, you've touched on many subjects there, kind of culturally, kind of generationally. Do you find that younger people, especially young women, are now more inclined to kind of be searching out the information? I mean, do you find that actually it's very encouraging that more women in Asia want to know about their sexual health, want to do something about it? Do you see that trend happening right now?
Definitely, actually, this is actually something we observed. It's not only in sexual health, but in the younger generations, like Gen Z,
Hmm.
they're way more outspoken and they are more progressive when it comes to searching for their self value. So, not only in healthcare, but in generally speaking, in their career, in their personal development, they are way much more progressive compared to the previous generations. So, this is definitely a good sign. One thing I guess like one example that I can bring up is so we have been doing some workshops with some student organizations from the college, so like at NTU or NUS, and sometimes the student organization there are actually quite a few talking about how women's rights, feminism, or even sexual health.
Hmm.
And I heard that there's this student organization, they were trying to start up a SNM workshop, which is kind of mind-blowing for me because it's like, wow, in my generation, if someone ever bring up this topic in the college setup, it's like a, like a so unaccepted. But then as far as we see, a lot of the younger generations, they have been very progressive. I think that's also why providing a little bit more information channels for them is actually going to be very helpful because they are actively looking for information sources. They're very thirsty to learn more about themselves. I think we don't have such a setup. We don't have enough information channels. We don't have enough platforms for them to vocalize their voices or even get access to services. So this is also like what we're trying to do. We are trying to bridging, more information and also on the service side.
No, fantastic. And I think there's a larger discussion to be had about sort of the democratization of kind of health in terms of, just the fact that you say TikTok, for an example, you have young girls who are more openly willing to express things about their body, their things about their kind of going through in front of complete strangers. But that is obviously very helpful because, I mean, still a lot of the mechanisms, the structures of society still work against, especially young women, government, but also the healthcare system is still largely dominated and set up through a lens. And I don't think this is just Asia. I think generally globally, we still have a healthcare system that's through the lens, kind of the male gaze, which still quite embedded. So I think that's really fascinating. And I'd like to definitely kind of come back to that. So I just want to talk about you a little bit more personally, just for a second, in terms of your actual journey, because it still takes a lot to connect the dots in terms of I've experienced something. And I think my experience with entrepreneurs, it's something they go through that leads them to kind of strive to build something, but to then still take the chance. And especially for you, you're not moved just doing it in San Francisco where you were based, you're moving to Singapore. So what was it like when you took that jump? Like, when you started to realize, and again, I've kind of set up my own thing, like when you started to realize all the great and bad stuff that come with being an entrepreneur and a startup owner?
Yeah. Oh my God, I have so many stories to tell.
You
I
can
think
share all of
like
them, please.
I guess like when I was moving, it was really funny. So I'm the kind I would think about that thing for a very long time. And if I actually make up my mind and determine this is something I want to chase after, I would go all in.
Yeah.
And then, so to a lot of my friends, it felt very sudden. I pretty much told everyone right after Halloween that I'm gonna move to Singapore to run a startup in 3 months. And none of them heard about my startup. None of them heard about my moving. So it was such a shock, and everyone was asking me if I was having a life crisis. And but to me, I think the way I do things is, I think that if you don't really jump into the water, you will never learn swim. So the only way you can learn or you'll force yourself to build up something that's great, and that you have to actually put yourself into a spot that you have no choice.
Mhm.
So I was exploring this idea for a little bit actually before I moved. I started thinking about startups, and I started thinking about building something like kind of associated with my life. And that's when I talked to a lot of people who grew up in Asia, either lived in Asia or actually lived in some other Western countries, about their personal experience. And I noticed that there was a need that a lot of people were having struggles going to gynae visit or going to doctor visit for some basic things. And for me, it's such a big problem in Asia. Then why would I stay in US, right? If I really believe in this cause, I should just go do it. So
Mhm.
everything just happened in my mind all of a sudden, and I decided, well, I'm gonna move back to Asia and I'm gonna do a startup. I don't know if that's gonna work, but then I want to do it. So I kind of made up. So the second when I made up my decision, everything happened really fast. I kind of like quitted my job and wrapped up everything, and figured out my life there in 2 to 3 months. And that was also like a busy time. I had a lot of travels. I think afterwards I moved everything to, yeah, pretty much packed everything or sold everything, and then brought like a few suitcases with me to Singapore. Actually, everything felt very real when I was on the flight. when I onboarded the flight, all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, wow, what
Yeah.
am I doing? Um, yeah, but after, since then, after I landed, I guess everything just started like moving. You know, when I first came to Singapore, because I didn't really have friends, I had one friend in Singapore. I knew no one, and I had no network, so I had to rebuild everything. And then, so my focus was really just trying to rebuild my life in Singapore or rebuild my network that could support me to actually start my startup journey. It was very challenging for the first couple of months, especially I came to Singapore right before COVID. So
Mm.
lots of people stopped meeting people who they didn't know, and then it was very hard to schedule coffee meetups. I think I guess I got lucky. A lot of people I reached out to, they were just so nice. Although they couldn't help me or they were in a completely different space, I think they were so open to connect me with the right people they know. And it's a very welcoming country so far, which I definitely appreciate that I choose Singapore instead of any other country in,
Hmm.
I guess, like in Asia when I decided to move. So the most challenging part, of course, was in the first couple of months, especially when I trying to learn about the whole new industry. I never worked in healthcare, and I didn't know doctors. So when I'm trying to learn about how it felt like to work with a doctor and where to find doctor, how to convince them. After we onboarded the first doctor or the first clinic to enable the services, everything just started moving. I think it became way much easier.
I think what I find fascinating. So I got introduced to you via a good friend of mine, and what I always found fascinating is that I've got this person who, on the one hand, is doing Forbes 30 under 30 and all these kind of great events, and on the other hand, is talking about going and packing the boxes for her product. Like, and I think my friend went and helped you one day. It's like that almost says that is almost a quintessential snapshot of what being an entrepreneur is. It's like there is this wonderful highs, but also, you have to kind of get into the weeds and all that kind of stuff. So, like, how's that been? How's that been like? Because I think you just described there, you moved country, so you've got to build a network for your company, but also for your own mental health. You need to know people, and you've got to get your product moving at the same time as things are snowballing a little bit in terms of people knowing about you, wanting you to participate in things, and you've got to balance all that. What was that like? And is there any kind of advice you can give people who might be going through the same sort of thing?
Well, yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster. Well, the good side, because being an entrepreneur means you're just so busy. You have to juggling between pretty much everything that you can think about, from the basic, yes, packing and doing a documentation, customer support, and to like everything. Especially when I first started, I was a solo founder. I
Yeah.
am still solo founder, but then I was a one-person team. So when I first started, everything just felt so stressful. I had friends like helping here and there, but then it's still different. I don't remember. I was talking about how customer support is so important to our business, and then by shortening, a certain amount of response time and how much conversion we increase. And then one investor actually stopped me and asking, "Who's the customer support?" And then I had to reply, just actually it's me right now. But then we are getting more people to help, so it's kind of funny sometimes. And of course, like the good sign is because you're so busy, so it's very hard. Or like at least for me personally, I'm just like have been like working on everything, and it's very rare for me to pause and be like, "Oh my god, my life is terrible." It happens, but then oftentimes following it, it's like, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm just gonna go take a nap."
Yeah.
Um, it's a I would say keeping a yes, definitely mental health is very important throughout this whole thing. So because you work on so many stuff, from the most detailed details to like a super high level decisions, it's very hard to switch mental stuff sometimes. Sometimes if I work on, like if I pack boxes for 20 hours per day, not never happened. But then just thinking about that scenario that, if you pack, you've been doing like all of the basic stuff for 20 hours, it's going to be very hard for you to overlook everything and say, my roadmap, this is my North Star. So I'm trying to switch my job grow a little bit, and also time to time to get additional help. And then now I have like a small team who has their own job function, so everything is like way much easier for me now. Um, yeah, if I had to advise someone who just started, who's about to start a startup, I guess, just like trying to find a way to keep your mental health healthy, or find a way to switch your mind off from all of the work a
Hmm.
little bit. To me, I tried a lot of things. Workout was definitely a big thing. I haven't worked out for a bit because I've been too busy. Or like meditation, I tried meditation for a little bit. And to me personally, I like spending time with friends. So although sometimes I get super busy and everything is just like piling up, I think I still trying to spare some time with my friends, at least once a week, so I can talk to people and get supported from each other, and then feeling the positive vibe that my friends can bring me, and that actually helps a lot.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point for anyone listening that I think, especially with COVID, the boundaries of home and work and everything is kind of is melded into one. So all those traditional cut-offs, whether it is just going for a drink with colleagues at 6 o'clock after work and things like that, all of those kind of lines, natural lines have started to blur a little bit. And so, and I've seen it with friends here, not just with entrepreneurs, where they've kind of started to lose sight a little bit of that balance. And I think, especially as an entrepreneur and doing a startup, kind of keeping that mental health, whether it's even just checking in with people just once a week for an hour, is super, super important because it's not just good for you. It's like you perform better. Like no one performs well doing 20 hours a day straight work, little sleep. You will always perform better. You've got more chance of success when you take that kind of mental kind of like health seriously, which is kind of very interesting because we're talking about sexual health and sexual well-being, which is a very taboo subject, which is now starting to come out a little bit, but slower, I would say, than say the mental health stuff, which has for years been ignored in, I would say, Asia especially, but globally. But at the very least now people are finding kind of empowerment to be able to talk about it and why it's so important. So I wanted to ask you because I do want to kind of come back to talking about the subject matter that kind of led you to your startup because I think it's very important to talk about what needs to happen, what the future is. But I do want to ask you about the Forbes 30 under 30 because it is a big deal for someone young and someone who's very new to the startup game. And I think you should be obviously very proud of yourself. But what was it like to kind of be announced as a 30 under 30?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. So for the record, I think it's like it looks way much more fancier than it is. It's just a title, and
Yeah.
then there's like a bunch of people who are good at marketing. There are so many great people who are out there doing great things. I mean, they are probably not vocalizing about what they're building, and I just got lucky. It's actually funny, like I actually learned about I was in the finalist the name when I was at Marie's place with you guys.
Oh,
Remember the
okay.
dinner?
Oh, yes, with the cats, where the cats didn't want to play with me but wanted to play with you.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, so when we were having dinner, all of a sudden I got a message from, one of the editors, and he's like, "Oh, so by the way, you are in the final list name, and I have one question for you, just like about some basic checkup." So I think to me, it's personally very important to me because, uh, funny story, a few years ago, when I was probably 25, so back in San Francisco, I had a lot of good friends who are very amazing. Everyone's doing fantastic things. A lot of them are super successful. And then back then when I was 25, I had this friend who tried really hard to get into Forbes 30 under 30. He's very, successful and running his startup and very like young, but young people, but an overachiever.
Mhm.
And finally he got into the list. And that was actually the first time I heard about this list. And then I was like, oh, there's such a thing. And to me, at 25, it was such a golden, shiny title. And I got very, I mean, on one hand, I was super happy for him because I knew it mattered a lot. And on the other hand, I actually had this moment, oh, I could never be like him. So I actually had this self-doubt. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there are so many people around me who are out there doing great things. And look at this. this is one example, but then I'm just like doing, I don't know, like looking for my life value and
Hmm.
searching for how to work better. So I was such a basic person that I could never be like them. And so later on, when I started doing my business, for other reasons, and I came across the list again. So when their application opened up and they do referral, um, so I was just like, oh, maybe I should try. And so when I got on the list, that was just a moment. It felt so interesting. I was like, oh, so I'm actually one of them now who carries a shiny name. Although it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that money, it doesn't mean that much anymore. Once I got to know about how everyone works, and I learned about your value is not defined by those shiny titles, but still that was one of them. I was like, oh, I'm so happy among me.
No, I think it's yeah, I think it's sort of similar to, so I've worked in comms and PR all my life. Every year you put your stuff forward for awards, and often it's the company that spent a little bit more time kind of shaping their narrative and all this stuff that has a better chance. But it still doesn't undo the good work and the reason why you have been chosen. So it's one of them things. It's, yeah, I think it's important to always put everything into perspective. And there's nothing worse than a founder, a super arrogant founder. I've met many of them in my time. So to always have things in balance. But also, I think what's also important is being an entrepreneur is hard, and you don't have a lot of wins, especially early on. It can be a lot of, you've got to get very used to kind of crappy emails or non-responses or people not working on your time frame. Like, that's my biggest thing, is my time frame is far more urgent than the responses I get, and all of that is the reality of being an entrepreneur. So I do think when you do get these wins, it is worth celebrating. And I think also one other thing to learn about this is put yourself out there, because irrespective of kind of everything, this is free advertisement for you. It gets you out there. So although maybe the title doesn't mean much, it really does actually provide very free PR, which again, as a startup, you don't get much of because there's a lot of startups out there. So I think for me, yeah, just it's always worth one, maybe kind of taking that shot, even when you're doubting it. And even though it's not obviously meaning you are God of the world or whatever, it does provide some kind of nice pat on the back and said, hey, you know what, actually there's value in kind of what you're doing. So anyway, that's my piece of advice. It's because it can be quite easy to be cynical. So um, okay, so I kind of want to scoot
Yeah,
back and then
for
scoot
me,
back. Oh, sorry, carry on. No, carry on, please.
I was just gonna say, I guess like for me, it feels more like a personal award
Hmm.
rather than a word of, or a proof of what I have achieved, but then like a personal award to, oh, look at what I have built as like a personal milestone, rather
Hmm.
than, oh, this is a proof of my business is doing so great.
I think that's an excellent way to look at it. I think it's like in whatever way you want to take it. I think there are, like you say, there are important things for yourself just to say. It's when that first client or that first 100 products sold. Actually, we had another guest on. She has a travel startup, and she was saying that it's weird as an entrepreneur that you celebrate this. Like, it's important to celebrate the minor things. So when you've got your 10th like on social media, or your 100th fan, or your 200 projects sold, all of these milestones, just to say, hey, our trajectory may be slow or maybe getting quicker, but our trajectory is in the way that kind of we want it to be, and that's not a bad thing to kind of be recognizing. So I'm going to jump back a little bit, and then I think what I want to do is, well, we've already been talking for 30 minutes. This is when it's a very interesting topic, always happens. So I'm going to jump back just to the topic a little bit, topic area, because I just want to make sure that we kind of covered it, because it is obviously a highly taboo area that's for a very long time, like we said earlier, been hard to talk about. So what do you, as a woman and as a person with a startup that focuses in on sexual health, what do you see or you feel needs to happen in society for it to become, like, it can't just be generational. You need bigger shifts in terms of government and finance and all of these different areas. Like, what do you think needs to happen for the conversation around sexual health to move forward at a quicker pace?
Yeah, again, that's a pretty good question. I think, generally speaking, there are probably quite a few aspects that we could work on as a society. For one is maybe, yeah, like you mentioned, the government support to provide more information channel, credit information channels instead of, blindly searching online. And those kind of information channels is small things and it's easy to do and it's not going to cost a lot of money. I think for people who are looking for help or looking for information, those could be the first step for them to learn about how to handle a lot of situations or how to learn more about themselves. And then the second part, I actually believe there should be more services. We are doing testings and we started seeing a lot of more services around contraception delivery or maybe just consultation or even just building a community. Those kind of platforms, I am a strong believer. Oftentimes people don't talk about the topic enough because they also don't see any reason to talk about this. So having those services available, for one, we provide probably more accessible solutions for in some certain perspectives. But then on the other hand, it's also a good way to encourage people to think about, because if you think about the products, you think about what's the reason or what's the things associated with the products and the services. And then that's when people started opening up. And when we have enough people to talk about a certain topic, and that's when the taboo around a certain topic started goes away. And of course, I think financial wise, I actually think it's less like a financial issue. Actually, maybe resource wise, we do see there is a lack even in the traditional healthcare provider space, that a lot of we can remove the taboo around sexual health or women's, we can remove the taboo around how women view their bodies or like the sexual health overnight. But then the reality is a lot of women prefer to see a female doctor or female gynecologist when it comes to their private concerns. But then we don't have enough female doctors. We don't have enough female gynecologists, we don't have enough female GPs in any clinic. So this actually stops a lot of women actually going forward to look after these services. So if possible, I definitely think in the future, this should be something, maybe the government or medical school should be trying to accept more female candidates, just so cut this part out, but I'm not sure if this is a very sexism industry. Actually, to be fair, I have no idea. But I feel there might be. So I heard some stories, but anyway, so I definitely think
you heard some stories about like just general sexism within the industry.
No.
Within like you said.
I think even just within the medical schools, I think I heard that sometimes male doctors are more favored compared to female peers, which actually lead to the fact why there are more male doctors than female doctors, and that this actually causes some issues for when it comes to patients' needs, because a lot of women patients do want to see female doctors. I think those are, and of course, like cost-wise, in Singapore or in some certain countries, the medical healthcare coverage is pretty good. So you get subsidized by the government a lot, but then in some more developing countries, the basic healthcare is still such a trouble for a lot of people to get easy access to. So those kind of things are definitely something we should be working on.
No, I think that's fascinating. I think, country by country, it's a different story. I think you have kind of different balance, like some for more progressive countries, and then you have others that the combination of poor coverage plus probably more religious aspects to the society that's probably not really comfortable talking about sexual health. Those things kind of combine, which kind of allows poor education around sexual health and also just not the means to be able to do something more comfortably. In terms of kind of sexism in medical profession. It's kind of one of those things that I would assume is just true. And I know that sounds weird but I think I just make the assumption that most structures in our society, whether we want them to or not, have predominantly been very male dominated and very patriarchal. And so within that kind of system, there's always going to be an element of sexism. And that's not really focused at the health profession. That's right across the board. Pretty much every industry has been dominated by men and with kind of very old attitudes. So I think we've had an explosion in the last decade where barriers are just being broken down continuously, and we've still got a long way to go. So although I don't have any anecdotes to say whether it's true or not, I always do the start point of every industry has had some level of sexism in it, and that's why, there have been structural issues with women being able to gain employment within the workplace, to have a fair pay, all of those things that kind of act as barriers. I honestly could talk about the issue for a lot longer, and I do think I'm so glad that I see you sort of on so many different podcasts and on so many different events you were invited to, because I think the more they have someone like yourself out there, and also people willing to have people like you out there kind of taking part in events, I think the better it is. And I think that's very, very important. But I do want to kind of end a little bit more on just jumping back to yourself. What's for you, outside of just obviously the wonderful startup you've started and really helping to make change with sexual health, like what's your future look like? Do you want to be a serial entrepreneur? Is it just you're going to make this huge, like you want it to be global, beyond Asia? What's your dreams for the future?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. For the start, I definitely hope my startup can be successful, way much more bigger than I could ever dream about. So if that's the start, I could, because for me, for one, this is my first startup, and but then I put so much effort, or I have so much faith in it, just because I think we are not only building a service, that we are not just generating revenue because we are building a product, but then we are trying to we are trying to make some impact in women's life. We're trying to make some difference in the society. So I definitely hope my startup can be super successful. In terms of the serial entrepreneur side, it's actually a very interesting thing. Before I started my business, I thought, because I always worked in corporate world, and I worked in tech, and I personally consider myself having a good work performance, just like above average. So I never thought about it's gonna be like a hard challenge for me to look for a job. So before I started my business, I was very chill. My hope was, if I fail on my business, I'm just gonna go back to the corporate and find a new job, and it's not gonna be like such a big deal for me. But once I started working on my own thing, it actually felt very different. I don't think I would ever go back to the corporate world again. If let's say in the scenario, if my startup fails, or if we find an exit, and I probably would just continue to build another thing. Maybe it's related to like what we're building right now, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a brand new industry for me to explore. But I'm definitely more excited to explore new ideas if I ever stop working on Fearn for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's often when I speak to entrepreneurs on here, but also in general day-to-day society, it's kind of you get that taste for it. You get that taste for kind of driving things and really owning them. And I don't mean like owning a startup. I mean like owning the issues, owning the direction. And obviously, when you're in a big corporate, as much fun as it is, you can get swallowed up. Even if you're great at your job, you're still within a kind of corporate structure, and there's always someone above you and kind of delegating down. So it's kind of a hard thing to go back to. And I haven't got too many friends. I find that the biggest jump I tend to see is maybe some people join another startup, and that's the kind of thing they don't mind doing. But yeah, I think people find the transition back to kind of the corporate world kind of a little bit difficult. So I wanted to ask you then, because of someone who has transitioned companies, started in an industry that she's sort of quite new to in terms of just in general, and has kind of definitely kind of got down in the weeds to kind of make it a success. What would be your top couple of pieces of advice to anyone listening who hasn't made the transition? So, like, if you're sat around thinking, maybe might want to do my own thing, what are the few things you would say to them to do? And it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually end up doing it. It could be just think of it like, seriously, this is something you're passionate about. But yeah, what are the pieces of advice that you think can help someone decide whether they will become an entrepreneur or not?
I guess I actually got asked about job transitions a lot because even before I started my business, I did quite a few job transitions. Like I did game design, I was an engineer. I think I decided to go pursue my design career, and then after doing design for a while, I decided, oh, I'm going to be a product manager, and then I decided to quit my job and work in a different industry. To me, normally I really just simply ask them what holds you back, what's scary about this, because I think a lot of times most of the people are very scared of making such a transition or making any kind of changes in their life. It's because they are very scared of some projected fear. It's not even real, and you haven't done it, so you don't know what's going to happen. And then oftentimes it's it's us mentally projecting some fear about, oh, it might be the failure, it might be some consequences that you haven't planned, it might be it might be some like life changes that you could not handle. So it can be a lot of things. But then if you actually look at all of the small pieces that hold you back, none of them is big or none of them is real. And especially like speaking from my personal experience, oftentimes the most scary part is actually right before you make the decision. Once you make the decision, once you started doing it, your mind will be focusing on how to rebuild your life around your change. And you wouldn't feel scared anymore. So actually, it's often the first step that you're taking that makes a difference. So I guess like for anyone, if you're trying to make any sort of a change in your life, and just to think about what are the worst consequences that can happen. And if the risk is really not that high, for example, for me, when I started my startup, the worst case is I'm going to go back to a corporate job. It's not that bad. And it's not as scary as, what we build up in our mental set. Oh, we're going to lose our job. We can't make money, and we will probably lose everything in that life. And then if you just look at everything and if you actually realize that nothing is that scary, and then I'm pretty sure you'll feel more encouraged to actually make some change.
Well, I think that is some fantastic advice, and I think it's really sort of important to remember. And I think that's very important to remember. I remember I was going to ask you, but I think you just answered it really. Like, what would your advice be to women founders who are kind of going to try and tackle taboo subjects? And I feel like that advice is very pertinent to kind of that anyway. So I'm going to leave it there, I think. I want to thank Xi for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I also would encourage everyone to go and check out Fearn Health. It's an amazing startup. Every time I've been around Xi, I've been lucky enough to be part of conversations where people are talking about, I think when we talk about that dinner we were both at, talking about sexual health and how sometimes it's very hard for different groups of women, whether depending on their sexual orientation, to really talk about. So there is so much work that still needs to be done. So I think something like this that can, provide women the confidence that often they may not have within the kind of general structures of the healthcare industry, I think is fantastic. So Xi, if you've got any final words, please go ahead. But if not, then I'm going to kind of finish our podcast.
No, I guess that's all. That's a very good summary, like Mark, like whatever you mentioned. I definitely feel like a lot of taboo topics, or not even taboo topics, a lot of things around female, like feminism, or like female career choice, gender equality, a lot of things. We just need enough people to talk about this, and then enough people to make actions. I think everything will be way much better. So thanks for having me here.
Of course. I've absolutely loved it. And honestly, I have a lot of faith in your startup. So I'm sure I'll be begging you to do a podcast with me again in about 6 months' time. And you'll be saying, Mark, I really, really don't have the time anymore. Like I've got too many things on. But I really do appreciate it. You've been a fantastic guest. Again, check them out. It's a fantastic startup that you really should know about. And I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and see you again next time. Bye bye.